afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's FdV Spring Seminar event, Climbing the Wine Marketing Ladder, California Style. Today's event is graciously sponsored by California Wines Canada. Thank you so much. My name is Debbie Shing, founder of Cuvée Group, a new boutique wine agency based in Toronto, as well as co-founder of VinEquity, a newly formed nonprofit benefiting people of color in Canada's wine business. And I'll be your host today. Thank you so much to FdV for having me. To recap the subject of today's seminar, we will unpack what it takes and what it means to be in the business of wine marketing, discuss how we each got our start, explore education, mentorship, and career opportunities. And we'll explore questions such as where does wine marketing stand today and what are the latest trends that are driving today's success. We're going to dig deep into this, and I'm very excited to do so by introducing the following guests. I have the privilege and pleasure of introducing three amazing women leaders in the industry who will be giving us their precious insights and personal stories today. First off, Honor Comfort, Vice President, International Marketing, California Wines.
Hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for having me today.
Hi, Honor. Thank you and welcome. Next, Shyla Salmon, Senior Vice President of Marketing for Jackson Family Wines.
Hello from the Napa Valley.
Hello, Shyla. Nice to see you. And last but certainly not least, Danielle Giroux, Canadian Director for California Wines.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us and taking your valuable time to be part of this segment today.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Please join me in welcoming my esteemed guests. If you have any questions for any of us, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box during the course of our seminar, and they will be forwarded by my FemDeven colleagues off screen to be covered towards the end of our time together. So I'm sure I speak for everyone attending this webinar that we'd love to learn a little bit more about each of your professional journeys. And for those of us in the audience who are newer on our paths, what is it that you all actually do day to day? Honor, would you mind please kicking us off by sharing a little bit about your career history and some of the main things that you do in your role today? And then we'll pass the mic to Shyla and then Danielle to introduce themselves and describe a bit about their current responsibilities. Thank you.
Absolutely, thanks, and I'm happy to. Like many of us in the wine world, I of course started someplace else, and my background before I was in wine was in the arts, and in particular in arts marketing. And I always talk about how marketing wine is very similar to marketing the arts, and that there's, I draw from that experience quite a bit. My education and my background originally, actually my BA is in art history, and it's always challenging to find a way to put your art history degree to work. So I ended up getting 2 master's degrees in MBA and then also a master's in arts administration. And I then I worked in the arts. I also worked in the private sector in marketing. But when my husband and I moved up to Sonoma County about 20 years ago, I recognized that one of us had to work in the hometown industry, working in the wine industry. And I loved wine and food for almost my entire life. So I was fortunate enough to step into this role. And interestingly, I now have used my nonprofit management background almost as much as my marketing background, particularly after working in brand marketing for both a small family-run winery here in the Dry Creek Valley in Sonoma County, but then also working on an international brands. That's really sort of where I developed my background in terms of understanding wine brand marketing, but then had the opportunity to run the Sonoma County Vintners, which is a marketing association for all the wineries here in Sonoma County, and really leaned into my nonprofit background. So running a membership-based organization is very different from running a wine brand, and it's been fantastic to be able to have that background and put it to use. So now I've been here with Wine Institute in the international marketing role for just over 2 years. I'm so thrilled to be able to do this. It truly is a dream job for me. And it's been interesting to sort of follow through this this overall pathway. But on a daily basis, really what I'm doing sort of two different things. First, I run a team of 20 people, working with them to manage the global brand of California wines, with a team that I also have based here in California. We run a number of global marketing initiatives for California wines, and then working with our team of representatives, of which Danielle is one of them, as a part of our fantastic team. We work to bring those initiatives to wine consumers and working with the trade all around the world. At the same time, I'm running a membership-based organization for 200 member wineries, and focus on ensuring that we're always delivering value to our members, not only in the activities that we're doing, but also helping to support their export business of their brands. So really, overall, we run sort of the way that I think about it is we have a very big umbrella of a global brand for California wines, and we need to be able to make certain that all of the wine brands, from small luxury producers to larger, more accessibly priced producers, can all fit under this image and the brand positioning of California wines that we're promoting globally.
Great. It's such a privilege to have you on the screen with us today. You have so much impact in how wine is marketed and sold here. So it's really great to have you on. Thank you. Next, Shyla, let's please hear from you a little bit about your career path and how you got to your current role today.
Yeah,
Please.
I think my bit of wisdom about my career is always figure out what you don't want to do. And through that, you'll figure out what you do want to do, because I think most people never go on a straight linear path, as Honor was saying. And I think you have to try things out. You really have to dive in. And I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I worked for the district attorney. I thought I wanted to go into academia and teach women's studies. I did research for the National Center for Women in Policing, realized I didn't want a life of that. And then I thought I wanted to go into winemaking, and so worked on that side and realized I didn't want to move hoses around and have wet feet all the time. And so I think that's my big bit of wisdom and takeaway is get in there and kind of figure it out. But my career itself, once I got into wine, I think one of the great things for me was I had a vision of what I wanted. And the vision came from working at Robert Mondavi Winery, very young. I was probably 18 years ago. And I saw a young woman walking around with a group of Japanese distributors, and she was graceful and they were engaging, and she kind of owned the place. And I thought, oh, that's what I want. I want to have that confidence. I want to work in international business. And so I had a vision of what I wanted. And I now look back and think, wow, I got to see a woman in that role too. And I think that was also very beneficial in that. So I worked for Constellation then from Robert Mondavi for 7 years. And I worked on the international side of the business, which is where I met Danielle in like 2004. And I had 45 brands in about 60 countries. And so we had 6 million cases of business. I was young, it was fast, I was traveling, I was just in it as you could be in the wine business. And I never said no. I always did more than I was asked. I had an incredible time just diving into this just fascinating industry. And what was most interesting was not only was it luxury and you got to have this incredible lifestyle, but it was agriculture and it was grounded. And so you had these two worlds that hardly ever come together. And for me, that's really what keeps me motivated even today, is that we get this luxury facing outside world. And then I come back to Napa Valley and I'm walking in the vineyards, working with winemakers. They have wet feet, they schlep the hoses, but we have this great, beautiful connection. And so then I started working for Jackson Family Wines about actually 10 years ago in November. And they asked me to run their luxury division. And so I left as big as you could be, biggest in the world, and started working on some teeny tiny little luxury brands for Jackson Family and building that. And that was an incredible experience. And so for the last 10 years, I've been working on that portfolio. I ran an internal agency for them. So I built an agency that had all of our design in-house, video production, research and insights, trade marketing, and then education. ran that for 4 years, and now I'm managing their luxury division and their Santa Barbara wineries. And so on a day-to-day basis, my life is very diverse. And I think also that's another bit of wisdom, which is think about what you want your job to feel like every day, because that's the reality of work. Work is not a fantasy of a job. It's what does it feel like? And for me, I knew I needed really interesting days, lots of different things every day. And so my day-to-day is extremely different. I go from working on supply planning, talking about grapes and production, yields, what's the crop look like right now, to big giant partnerships with music festivals and things like that within an hour. And then working on creative. So I have this big range in my day-to-day. And I think on the supplier side, different from these two, in marketing, you do have two distinct roles. One is the internal operations, because marketing is the hub of the wheel in a supplier. And so you're connected to the grapes. And then there's the market side, which is the outward facing, which is what everybody sees of marketing. And so that's a little bit about what my days are like.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Shyla. And I love what you had to say about, really really connecting what happens in the land to, then creating value and a whole, image behind that to then offer to the end person. I think some of what we'll explore today goes along those lines of really understanding, what happens behind the scenes, before the wine even gets onto a shelf or a wine list at a restaurant. There's so much work that I think all four of us have had experience in doing. So I'm very excited to explore that with you. And Danielle, welcome. Lastly, but not leastly, may you please introduce a little bit about yourself and your current role and responsibilities?
Absolutely. Thank you, Debbie. I think that we're finding very, very much similar paths in terms of nothing was a straight line. And that holds well for me as well. So after a degree in commerce, I didn't have a clue really what I wanted to do or be. And I traveled on an exchange program to France. And that's where I had my wine epiphany. So let's say I went to Beaune, explored great wines, and determined that this is something I think I really have fallen in love with. What a great discovery for me. So I came back to Canada and I started out in HR, actually in labor relations for an association. Then I moved to a packaged goods company, and I was also in personnel. It was a tier 1 packaged goods company called Mars. And they believed in developing people and developing them in such a way that you explore beyond your boundaries of what you thought you would do. So what I loved about what they offered me is the opportunity to try something else, because quite frankly, I really hated PO and the personnel side of things because it was not for me and not for what I wanted to do. I was someone who liked more tangible aspects of my life, like to deliver something, and that's just not what you find in the personnel role. So I did a stint in logistics, new business development, starting up some new ventures for them. And then I ended up in marketing. And it was just like this aha moment of this is where I found the perfect match of what I love to do. So wine, how do I bring wine into that whole mix? I ended up leaving this company and taking quite a haircut. So let's just be known that when you want to pursue your dreams, you need to know you really want to do it and you're willing to take some steps backwards for what's going to come in the future. I think that was a big learning for me. So I joined Vincor. I joined Vincor Canada when it was in its infancy and just starting out on the acquisition trail. And I grew with the company is how I'd like to look at it. So, give a busy person something to do and you find that you're tapped on the shoulder and you're handed more projects. And that's the way it basically went. I think one of my proudest moments there was when Harry McWaters, hi Krista Lee, tapped me on the shoulder and said, I'd like you to be my first brand manager, when we had acquired Sumac Ridge and Hawthorne Mountain Vineyard at the time. So my career there was lots of great opportunity, and it's really about developing myself personally and being with a company that was at the time very, very caring. I have very many progressive roles through the company, growing and developing. And then we were acquired, right? So we were gobbled up. That's where I met Shyla. And we had a great time together working on, I think she said 45 brands in numerous countries. Well, I had 45 brands in the country, in addition to all of the portfolio of the Okanagan as well. So it was a big role. It was exciting. It was fast forward to a really great time in my life. And then, big became bigger and bigger. And then there was a point, I think, in my life when I realized that this is no longer fun. And that was a hard time. It was a hard decision to make, to say that what is important to me in my life is not necessarily corporate. And it's time for me to do something else. So I actually jumped ship and went on my own. And I started consulting for various small producers. I discovered that I was really good at doing the work, but not very good at finding the work. So, you start to realize what your skills are and where you could use some help. But again, proudest moments when Don Triggs tapped me on the shoulder and asked him to help him out with his project, Culmina Estate Wines in the Okanagan. So fast forward to today, I landed my dream job, which is to be director of California Wines Canada. And I think I like to describe my role now as really, we're responsible for growing the love for California wines in Canada, across Canada, to consumers, trade, and media. So really taking the great work that Honor's been doing from an international perspective on developing what the California brand stands for, because once you know what you stand for, everything else comes easy in how you execute and market. So it's bringing those strategies to play and executing them across the country. And it's really leveraging everything I've done in the past. Liquor boards, we all know they're there and they still exist. And the same people are in those roles, I've discovered. And managing our on-premise and helping through right now with COVID, all these accounts that are suffering so strongly. How can we help, leverage and lift up our Somm community in a way? So it's been an exciting time. I did start this a year ago, and it was exactly when COVID hit. So it's been a challenging year, to say the least.
Well, we're all thank you so much, Danielle, and we're all very grateful to at least still have access to a lot of California wine to enjoy. I certainly have been enjoying my fair share of California wine during the pandemic, that's for sure. So that's actually a really great segue to what I want to kick off our conversation about in the first half of our time together. I'd really like to focus our discussion on the contrast of marketing California as a wine brand versus marketing California wine brands, because they're intimately related, but not exactly the same. And I think each of you kind of touched on a little bit of that contrast. And so for some context for the audience, California wine sales generate about $1.2 billion of revenue in Canada. So Canada is the single most important and largest export market for California wines. We're talking about roughly 6.4 million cases of wine and about 15% market share nationally. So about 1 in 8 bottles purchased in Canada is California wine, which is a really powerful thing to be able to say. So hats off to all three of you. And let's talk a little bit, please, about what it takes to stay at number one, because I think being at the top is often the toughest role to undertake. So, Honor, if you could please help us get into a golden state of mind. Can you please share with us the main pillars of California Wine's new brand story, please?
Sure. Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate that. And, we talk quite a bit about the fact that marketing a region is very different from marketing a single brand. And as I mentioned earlier in my opening, that we really focus on having a big tent, a broad umbrella under which we can tuck a lot of different brands, but at the same time, make certain that each brand can maintain their distinctiveness, adhere to their strategy. It's a delicate balance to ensure that we can present the whole face of California wine, yet still ensure that they're able to, that each brand is able to grow and develop their business. So, and at the same time, we're not, as Shyla mentioned right up front, we're not actually producing our own individual wine. So I'm no longer dealing with what is my pricing strategy, what is my distribution strategy, how am I building my portfolio. I'm working to make certain that all pricing strategies can fit under the way that we're presenting California, that is, it aligns with both luxury and prestige brands, but also more accessibly priced brands that are larger, that are more perhaps at the entry, sort of a lower level entry point brand. And that's a very tricky thing to do. How do we satisfy Screaming Eagle and Silver Oak at the same time that we work with our broader brands such as Vintner's Reserve Chardonnay, one of the most important Chardonnay brands that we produce in the state of California. So within that, we need to really focus on how do we present the whole category of California wines in a very distinctive and powerful way. And at the same time, making certain that we are presenting the face of this category in a way that's relevant today. And through a lot of our consumer research and also actually research with our trade, we recognize that the image of California wines isn't necessarily internationally, isn't always in line with what's really happening here right now in terms of winemaking. And one of the reasons for that is because as the U.S. is the largest wine consuming market in the world. As a result, many producers in California really just focus domestically in terms of selling their wine. So while we're number one in terms of wine consumption, number 4 in terms of wine production, we're number 7 in terms of exports. And what that means is we're looking more right here than we are necessarily around the world. As a result, the selection of wines in other international markets isn't necessarily as broad and diverse. So our goal is, and my goal truly, is to make certain that California's image internationally is reflective of what California's wine industry looks like and the wines that we're currently making. And interestingly, California globally is known as a destination, and it is loved and it's admired. We're known for our lifestyle, for our mindset, for our natural beauty. So our challenge is, how do we connect those things with the wine in the glass? And so as we looked through this and really sort of evaluated where we wanted to go, we decided to build our strategy around presenting our distinctiveness, our California-ness, really, as a wine region, and that what that's built upon are our values and beliefs. The things that we share, that we know, they're in our heart, they're in our DNA as Californians. And how do we lead with that? And that's so important, particularly when we're considering the fact that we're competing with beautiful wines from wine regions all around the world that all are producing interesting site-specific wines. So how can we make that important connection with our consumers and with our stakeholders? Only by really leading with our California-ness. And the way that we've defined that is building around these 4 key pillars of our brand that we've identified to really get to the heart of what makes this place special. And we define those as innovation, boldness, sustainability, of course, and then this all-important golden state of mind. And here in California, innovation is just so much a part of who we are. It's behind our pioneering spirit. It's such it has been one of the important components of driving us forward. Here, innovation is, it's aspirational, it's exciting. In some regards, it's sexy. Silicon Valley and some of the ideas coming out of there have changed the way that the world works. Hollywood tells stories that are shared around the world. Skateboarding started here. The martini was developed in California. I mean, there's so many things that we've developed. So that's just a part of who we are. When we talk about boldness, we're really talking about that sort of star power that we're fortunate to have. And when we tie that into the wine industry, we're really looking at who our stars are, who are our young winemakers and wine growers, and the way that they're thinking about advancing wine growing and winemaking from a uniquely California perspective, and working with them to share our stories. In terms of sustainability, that is at the backbone of how we grow and make our wines here in California. We have been leaders in sustainability for more than 20 years. We have the world's largest certification program for sustainable wine growing. We have more acres of vineyards that are certified sustainable than any other wine region in the world. Yet we don't tell that story often enough because we've been so focused on doing it that we haven't been focused on talking about it. And it's very much a part of who we are and how we approach the world, recognizing that what we have here in California is unique and precious. So how do we protect it and preserve it for the future? And then finally, and sort of most importantly, is this concept that we described as this our golden state of mind. And that really gets to the optimism, the inclusiveness, the open-mindedness that is fundamental to this place here, and that we absolutely bring that into our winemaking. So we know that consumers, while they can certainly appreciate and enjoy wines from all around the world, what's most important is connecting with them in a meaningful and lasting way. And we believe that connecting with consumers with the values and beliefs that are at the center of who we are as Californians, if they can relate to that and we're connecting with them on values that our customers also share, that is a really lasting and powerful connection and relationship with wine. So it becomes more than just what's in the glass. It's what we stand for and what we believe in. And we're hoping that by sharing that with the world, other people that believe in those same things will have an attraction and a lasting relationship with our wines. So that's how we're presenting California, and then putting that into practice and into play. And it'll be interesting to hear Danielle share some of the things that she's been doing up in Canada, because she has done such a great job of jumping into this and recognizing that there's a lot of room and a lot of things to work with within this positioning.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Honor. I think even just hearing that, like I feel like mentally I was transported to California there just for a few minutes. So definitely those values certainly resonate with me. And Danielle, perhaps you can shed some light on how those four main pillars might play out locally here. For example, as we mentioned, Canada is far and away the most important export market for California wine. What are some ways that Canada is executing this strategy that's, unique to this market, for example?
Yeah, thank you. So I think Honor really nailed it from a marketer's point of view, is that once you've established what your point of difference is and what's so ownable by you, in this case, the region, it's so easy to execute against this and to bring it to life. And that's hard work. So I want to just give credit here of, I know what behind the scenes was like to kind of get to this place, because developing your brand positioning and what you represent and stand for is one of the hardest exercises you could do. And if you get it right, and I think we've so got it right for California, the rest just comes easy. So my job's going to be really easy. I just have to bring this to life in Canada. And how are we doing that? Well, we're focusing on bringing that golden state of mind, because Debbie, as you put it, it resonates so well with us, particularly right now, because we're in another lockdown here. And my God, we want to travel. The wanderlust to get out of here and go somewhere else, particularly California, has never been so strong. And so what are we doing? So specifically to Canada, we focused on engaging a younger consumer. And really, I think the second part of what Honor mentioned was about resonating, and it's resonating on an emotional level. So it's not just, the fact-based, here's where we are, we've got some nice vineyards and look at these grapes, because everybody has that. But it's this emotional level of, you're surfing, you can go to California and surf here and then ski there. The vineyards are great, but the food is amazing, because tacos started there. So there's just so much that we can do to bring that to life. So what we've engaged in here is we've created a mini series of videos. These are little mini California road trip videos to satisfy the current wanderlust of the consumer, particularly this younger demographic that we're trying to kind of bring along our wine journey and introduce them to California wines as their drink of choice for the future wine steps that they're going to be taking. And so these videos are really short snippets. They showcase the region of California. They transport you there visually. Then you enjoy some food and wine pairing presented by a sommelier and a local host that we found from Quebec, who's just a delight. And these segments, we're able to promote them digitally, because that's how we communicate right now to the consumer and get millions and millions of impressions. So that's how we're, in one way, bringing this to life. And I guess the other pillar that's really, I think, key that I gleaned on very early on was the sustainability pillar. I had no idea before I started this role of what California had been doing and the leadership role that they were taking in terms of sustainability, what that means. And it's not just about the planet. So I kind of want to lay this out here. This is a soapbox I like to get on. So it's really people, planet, and prosperity. Like, those are the three holistic approaches that I think make it so special and so important for us to communicate of what's happening, because what we're doing now matters in California, and it matters that it's going to fight climate change. And we are in the forefront of how we do that. So everything that we talk about in Canada, we've woven in the sustainability messaging. We're just trying to get it out there in a very clear and succinct way. And I have to say that that's one thing I think is our next nut to crack. So if we look at what are our challenges, is just how do we communicate what sustainability is in a meaningful way to the consumer that they understand and can grasp instantly, and it's an emotional connection. That's what's key, is that once they believe something emotionally, it's just very easy to go buy it. So we want people to care, and why should they care? Those are kind of the two things that we're working on now.
Can I just pile onto that super quickly? Because I so appreciate the fact that you brought that up, Danielle. And I think that the way that we're approaching it from our perspective is one of the most important things that we can do is inspire our customers to make the choice to purchase wines that benefit not only the environment, but also the communities where they're made, and ultimately the whole holistic approach behind sustainability is so important. So our job is to message all of this correctly and clearly and inspire people to make the right choices with a lasting benefit for all of us. And that's our goal.
That's great. Thank you, Honor. And also thank you so much, Danielle, as well. Certainly, as we'll explore later today, something that I've always believed is that wine is a business of people, right? It is also a wine business of, land and products and, sexy restaurants and things like that. But at the end of the day, it is a very interwoven community of people. And so that's definitely very inspiring words to hear from both of you. So next, Shyla, I would really love to please hear from you. First off, wondering if you had any, thoughts to echo from this previous question.
Yeah, I think, and I'll go quickly because you ladies covered a lot of how we differentiate kind of brands from regions. And so that's wonderful because we're all doing the same thing. That's why we're successful. I also want to say a huge thank you to you guys for keeping the California image sparkling the last 4 years, because we very much tried to differentiate California from some of the other parts of what's happened here. And so I think we've done that, and we've kept people engaged with our category through a lot. And so just on the sustainability thing, I think one thing we say at Jackson Family Wines all the time, every day, is that we're farmers first. And farmers have a responsibility to the land. They have a responsibility for the future, to the soil, to the air that surrounds them, to their communities, to their water supplies. And that's really the attitude that I think California takes. And a lot of the rest of the world does too in wine. And I think that needs to be, to Honor's point, yelled a little bit louder, because our industry cares a lot. And we're not that good at talking about it because we're just busy making wine. So I wanted to say that. And then just a quick few things as a marketer of brands, I think what we have to understand is that all wine is luxury. Even low end wines, to most people, even lower end, it's a luxury product. It's something they're choosing to buy at a higher price than, any way that you could just get alcohol. And so with luxury comes responsibility to bring something more. And I think the goal for us is to make people feel good and to transport them, as Danielle said. But just remembering that this is somebody's choice. They're investing a fair amount of money to elevate their senses for the evening, for their special event. And I think that's a big part of wine marketing. And then on the consumer side, I think a big part is understanding occasions, the occasions with which your wines are drunk. And so when you have multiple price points, understanding why people are making those purchase decisions at those different price points, and then marketing toward that, because wine is usually occasion-based. Outside of COVID, we all had lives. We used wine for all kinds of things. It's why wine has tanked in China, because China was usually only drinking for social occasions and parties, and wine has just plummeted because they don't have that right now. And so I think understanding how your consumers are enjoying the wine, and then with that, also how they purchase wine and their purchase behavior. And when they walk into a store, what are they thinking? Are they thinking about their dinner for that night? Are they thinking about what they're going to do in the weekend? And knowing you have 2 seconds to get their attention in there. And so how do you captivate them and pull them in with visuals, with packaging, with your latest promotion, with things like that? And then understanding your channels, The direct-to-consumer channel is wonderful because you can build loyalty and stay engaged. And outside of direct-to-consumer, how do you stay engaged with your consumers? And pre-social media, that was really, really hard. But now we have this incredible channel that we can do that from. And in the digital space, we've watched consumers move over to e-commerce with incredible rates. And I think even out of COVID, they're going to keep buying online. And so how do we keep talking to them? How do we make it a little more engaging, a little more tangible for them? You bring a lot of video in, you bring a lot of visuals. And so I think for marketing into the future, that gets really, really exciting. And I think also loyalty programs are kind of a big part of that. And then one thing, once this isn't effective in COVID, but I think a huge part of being a marketer is listening. You have to listen to what people are saying, both the trade and consumers. And, Danielle and I met up in Canada doing a lot of events, like a lot of California wine tours, a lot of winemaker dinners. And what I love about those things is it's basically a little case study. You get to stand behind the table and do your own little consumer research, and you listen to what people say when they engage with your wine, when they comment on your label, the questions they ask. That sometimes to me is the most valuable research. And I run a research and insights department, so what we do all day, every day. But I sometimes say, get behind the table. Just stand behind the table and listen and see how people are engaging, or go on account calls, go to restaurants, try to sell wine. It's really hard. It's really, really hard. And when you get in there and you see what the decisions a buyer has to make all day, and you start asking them questions, you then can be a better marketer because you understand what they're going through and how they have the opportunity to tell their stories. So that's just a little bit more on the brand side and marketing specific.
Thank you so much, Shyla. I love it. That definitely rings true for me. I have this saying that I've shared with, my, reps that I've managed in the past now, that nothing bad comes from just walking into an account, whether it's a store or a restaurant or, an event venue. You can always learn something, even if somebody didn't buy a case of wine that day, right? So there's always something to learn and to observe from going to listen to, where the customer is. So that's so great. And, that what you mentioned really has, explains really beautifully, we have to take into account all these different aspects because, California wine, as you mentioned, means so many things to so many different people. It is a luxury, but there's corporate buyers, there's sommeliers, there's, wine collectors, everyday consumers, you have such a vast portfolio of brands to work with to, make all of your brands, fit that, the main objective. And so, curious to know, in your opinion, what do brands, whether it's your own or other brands out there, what do brands need to, do better and do next, particularly as we, recover from the pandemic?
Yeah, I think I alluded to a little bit of that, but a few other things I think that are important in regards to the trade. And how do you bring the trade in, and how do you make sure your stories are told? And there's a few ways. And I think one thing that's really opened up in COVID is the ability to take all of our winery personalities, whether it's our owners, our winemakers, our ambassadors, our master somms, and directly connect them with the trade through Zoom, through Teams. And the ability to have these very intimate conversations with these people that make the wine, that run the winery, I think has been wonderful for our industry. And I think that that's kind of a dream. I mean, in the past, you would send a winemaker out and they'd maybe get to meet, with 20 to 50 people if you had some pretty good events planned and some small intimate dinners. And then they came back. And now we can have these, one-on-one conversations, small group conversations, and you can keep doing them. And so I think that's going to last out of COVID. Yes, the ultimate goal is to have everybody at our wineries, but that can't always happen. And so I think that intimate connection that's been created in this digital space, which is ironic, I think will stay in a way. And so I think just continuing to nurture things like that. I'm also on the board of the Sommelier Foundation, and we do a sommelier camp where we bring somms out once a year to come and get a deep immersion in Napa and Sonoma. And so a lot of regions do that. A lot of suppliers do that. I think those are things we just have to keep doing because those create lasting impressions and connections to brands and wineries and people that don't go away. And then I feel like with the trade to for the brand side, it's always about elevating and educating and really getting into things, and then helping them understand how to distill that to the consumer. Because we're in the wine business because we're dorks and we're geeky and we love it. But that doesn't always work, right? That's not always the best way to sell wine. And so you kind of want to go in it and then say, okay, and then we're going to get down to these 3 points. And I'll give you a great example. I have this beautiful winery called Cambria in Santa Barbara. And it was a very complex story. It's a state owned, it's got a lot of history. Santa Barbara is a very unique region. That story is just being told loudly. And we weren't translating. It wasn't getting across. And where we got, to Danielle's point, after lots and lots of work, and one of the biggest events that helped, we were down in LA, standing behind a counter talking to 3,000 women for 2 days. And where we got after all of that was women-owned, woman-led, certified sustainable. That's it. And it's working. And so we took something really complicated and distilled it to these nuggets that matter now, and that are true and authentic to the winery. And so I think that's, a really great way to kind of approach a lot of the things that we do. So those are my big ones, probably on the branding on the trade side and the moving forward.
If I could, just on Shila's point of, what the silver lining of COVID, and the great example she gave about connecting like this. And we were doing a webinar for trade. We actually now can give samples, because that's a big missing element of having people actually tasting the wine along with us. But what was amazing to me was, here I have these top winemakers from 5 different properties that I would never get in the room at the same time. And this is an amazing opportunity to have them tasting along with our trade across the country. So I could have 150 people joining us to do this. And that's just something fantastic that silver lining that COVID's given us. And I think that's here. I'm hoping to stay. Maybe it'll be a hybrid version of this going forward, but that's an amazing opportunity.
I think that, we always talk about the fact, and you mentioned it, Debbie, just in your comments, that wine is a business of people. And it truly is. We all know it's a business that's built on relationships. And of course, we'll never replace the impact and the power of sitting directly across the table from someone and tasting the same wine together. That will never go away. However, having this opportunity to connect with people globally so quickly and so much more frequently, as Shila said, is just so valuable for us. And one of the things that we have done as California Wines during this whole pandemic has been to proactively reach out to our partners in the trade, and in particular in the on-premise, that has just been devastated through this whole time period, reaching out to let them know that we are here. California Wine is here. We want to maintain those relationships, support our partners, recognize that they're going through a really challenging time, and then listen and understand what can we do to help them, not only during challenging times of shutdown, but now as at different in different parts of the world, we're beginning to shift and look towards reopening, towards rebuilding our business. What can we do as California Wines to help support our on-premise partners as they're looking to reinvigorate their business? And so we're listening to that. One key point, as Danielle said, is education. So we've heavily focused on that. We've tried to use this time to connect our stakeholders with our winemakers to provide them with a little bit more information. We're listening and hearing how we can support our on-premise partners by lending promotional support as they're reopening their wines, helping to reach out to their customers to bring them back into the restaurants and into the wine bars and so forth. All of these things. So taking that relationship to a whole nother level. And that has been one of the little silver linings that we've gotten out of COVID. And I'm convinced that that investment in these relationships will help carry us forward. There's a benefit of making the world a little bit smaller in that regard, and helping to really tighten those relationships up, because this is what makes it fun, right? We're all in this because it's really interesting and because of the people that we meet. So
yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Honor. And yes, certainly, I think one of the observations for me is that, with such a wider reach now with, digital activities, I think the level of engagement that we're seeing within the trade and consumers really speaks to, the wine loving community's desire to connect. We've really felt that as a big gap in our lives. So, kind of looking to the future, I've just got one more question before we turn it over to the second half of our discussion. So, Danielle, what are some of the, major trends or growth drivers that, you're seeing from, the supplier side or brand side of things? And what are some of the things, with us reopening and recovering from the pandemic that you would like to see in the next couple of years, please?
Sure. Well, I think that, one of the biggest things we're seeing is a continuation of a trend towards healthier lifestyles and better for the planet. And that's that whole move to, low cal, low alcohol wine and sustainability. I think those are really key. But I think under COVID, we saw a huge shift in what people were buying, right? So the trend moved to large format bag and box because it was grab and go, very easy in a unsafe environment to get something that you can put in your fridge or on your counter, and it's good for 6 weeks. And what a great package! So talking about packaging, this is I'd love to see a lot more California premium offers in that format. It's convenient, and I'd like to have more of it on my shelf. But also alternative packaging coming onto the market. So I was fortunate enough to be the first VQA wine brand in a can. So we're seeing a lot more offers now coming from California, putting wine in alternate packages because our younger demographic and others, it's convenient, it's easy. They grew up drinking out of drink boxes, so there really isn't the same kind of traditional way of thinking about wine. I think at one point, Shiloh and I developed a PET for Twin Fin that our customer wanted. So alternative packaging, Tetra's making another resurgence at the LCBO. I'm seeing a lot more of that happening here. And this kind of pent up demand for convenience. I think we need to look at the category differently and get off the high horse of this is the way it has to be. There are alternate formats that people are seeking, and hopefully we see more of that coming into the market. And then the other surprising to me was we thought that everything was moving to tried and true known brands, but we also saw this treating factor. So consumers were looking at, I can't travel, I can't spend my money on eating out. So they're treating themselves to very nice wine, and California certainly has benefited from that. So we saw this kind of premium over $30 price point, luxury price points really taking a huge spike. So people were buying more luxury wines. We hope that continues because it's certainly a benefit for our category. Really, those are kind of the great things coming out of COVID. And then, in Quebec is a challenge market for us here in Canada. They posted sugar levels on the tags that are there. And what we're seeing is that California wines, because of the nature of the high alcohols, there's kind of an affiliation with high sugar. So, work to be done at swaying the consumer in Quebec and from working with our suppliers to say, you need to kind of think of that European palate and tailor your wines to that palate in this marketplace. They want lower sugar levels. They won't even look at the category in Quebec if you're not under 4 or 5 grams per liter at this point. So that's kind of the main what's going on. Really want to see a lot more movement in promoting sustainability and how we get that message across. I think, quite frankly, we do that better. People understand their choice matters, and that will make a difference for all of us.
Great. Thank you so much, Danielle. And I guess, either, shameless plug or, success story, to follow up on your point. This time last year, I was just coming back from a failed trip to Europe because Provine was canceled. I got stuck in France. I had no suppliers, nothing going on for my company that I started last year. But very happy to report that my very first product is coming out in vintages. And to echo what you were saying about, trends and what, buyers are looking for, that first product is actually a premium California wine. That's a 3-pack can. It's called West and Wilder. It tastes amazing. And, it's really interesting just to see, all of these things really start to happen, in real life. And, anyways, that's enough of my own shameless self-promotion. In the second half of our panel discussion, I really want to talk about, one of my favorite truisms, as I mentioned, wine is a business of people. I certainly wouldn't be where I am without my supporters, nor the people who have, challenged me over the years to grow and thrive. So I really want to focus the remainder of our time together on human connections, what we as marketers do to give people that warm, fuzzy feeling about our wines, us apart from alcohol, and what we do as professionals to further ourselves as well, because we all came from somewhere, and we just certainly didn't start here. So Shyla and Honor, we spoke on our prep call about being mindful of what I'd like to position as, cultural distinctions rather than cultural differences per se. And we've also clearly seen over the past, few years with these, activist movements that there are groups of people that have felt consistently underrepresented and worse, misrepresented in media, which I will extend to include in, marketing content and, our efforts as wine marketers as well. So, who or what do we need to include in our thought process? How can we make our messages more meaningful and authentic? Maybe Shyla, I'll start with you, please.
Sure. I actually want to start with an example of the success. So I live in downtown Napa, and I walk my dog during the COVID, sometimes twice a day downtown. And it's, downtown is happening. There are hotels, there's restaurants, everything is outdoor dining right now. So you have a very visible idea of what's going on. And when the Black Lives Matter movement really took hold, Napa realized it had been exclusive, not inclusive. And I was on many a call, many a discussion with the Napa vintners and all of our members saying, wow, we've screwed up. And we didn't do it on purpose, but now we know better. And we have to make some pretty bold statements about who we are and what we are all about. And I will tell you that I have watched, and so these statements came out from all of our brands, from our vintners associations, from our tourism associations. I have watched the demographic in Napa shift in who's coming, who's staying at hotels, who's dining in our restaurants, who's filling our streets. I've watched it shift so quickly. And because of the power of messaging and the power of saying, one, apologizing, and two, letting people know that they're all included and welcome here. And so I think that's a really good example of the power of honesty and the use of marketing to open up, a whole world. And, Napa had a reputation, and we got it. And so very quickly it changed. So I think that's a great place to start. I think what I like to think about is cultural sensitivity and just a consciousness that I think we're all waking up within business and within media, and making sure that people can see themselves. And if they can see themselves, they can imagine. It was exactly to my comment earlier about seeing this woman who was running international business at the time and saying, oh, I can be that. And so I understand the power of that. And it's not that the wine industry has always been unconscious. I mean, it's 17 years ago at Constellation. Every time we had a photo shoot, we talked about who exactly was going to be in the photo shoot. What was their age going to be? What was their race or ethnicity going to be? What was their gender going to be? And so it's not that we've completely been unwoke to this idea. And so, that was a long time ago. I think we're just continuing to build off of that. And I think the cautious waves here are not to overgeneralize, to realize that everybody is unique, and to honor all of that, and to make statements around that. And for me, also, one thing that's interesting and I've learned in my career is a huge part of diversity is age, and we don't talk about that a lot. And particularly as a marketer, you need to make sure that you are getting voices of people from different generations, because in our business, it's all generations are buying wine, and we're trying to bring in a younger generation. And so when I do, for instance, creative reviews, I make sure I have at least people from 2 to 3 different age groups and different generations looking at it and saying, how do you see this? And how does this impact you? And so I think it's diversity in so many ways. And just having a lot of honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversations around it. But I think we're all getting really comfortable with the uncomfort. And so I think that's kind of the moment that we're in. And then I just want to call out a few organizations, because there are some great organizations bringing more diversity into the wine business. And so I mentioned the Sommelier Foundation. They have some scholarships out there right now. The Napa Vintners just committed $1 million to the United Negro College Fund to bring in people of color to our colleges that do winemaking and viticulture programs. So that's $200,000 a year for 5 years to UC Davis, Sonoma State, Napa Valley College. So that's a very big statement and a really great amount of money from my Napa community that I'm very proud of. There's a job fair. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, called Be the Change. And that last round, they had 2,400 jobs in wine, beer, and spirits. And they were trying to reach out to a diverse group of people. And so that's also another interesting organization that's out there.
Great. Thank you, Shyla. That's amazing. And I know that there's quite a bit of support actually that California Wines Canada has made available to interested people locally here as well, which I'll wrap up as we talk about the end. But maybe Honor, can you share a few thoughts about how, inclusion and diversity might make sense, in your field, please?
Absolutely. And I think, well, first of all, Shyla, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it was just spot on. And I agree with all of your points. I'm so glad that you brought all of that forward. And it's something that thankfully has been sort of shoved into the spotlight, and as it should be. And it's an issue now that we've all been given the opportunity to expand our thinking about how we define diversity and inclusion within our industry. How do we then fold that into what we're doing in small ways as well as large ways every day? And it definitely is time to expand this conversation. And I feel that from our perspective, one of the things that we're able to do working globally with California Wines is to help bring some of these topics, some of these ideas into other markets through what we do. For example, with last summer, when the whole issue with the Court of Master Sommeliers sort of came to light, and I know that many of us probably on this webinar, when we heard some of those painful stories, while it's always shocking to be brought face to face with that, it also wasn't surprising. And we've all seen and experienced issues within various stages of the wine industry in terms of challenges that people have faced. Some of them ourselves, others coworkers, etc. Knowing that some of those issues related to gender within the wine industry had been highlighted here in the US, we also know that those are present in other parts of the world. Also race and ethnicity, age bias, all of these things. So how can we help bring this conversation forward globally and be leaders in that? That's one of the questions that we've been discussing. And Danielle has been working with us in just bringing forward a new partnership and working with ASI, the Global Sommelier Organization. And we're so thrilled to be a partner with them now. And we have asked to work with them as they're looking to explore what a platform can be around diversity and inclusion within the professional sommelier community. And as California Wines, our mission is to help open the doors and to invite anybody in who wants to pursue a professional career in wine, either on the service side or in terms of production, and do what we can through education. So that's one of our missions going forward. And I think that we're fortunate in that we're able to help shape this conversation on a global basis by being sensitive to cultural differences and distinctiveness. And again, that's the beauty of what we do. Thank goodness it isn't the same all around the world, because then it wouldn't be interesting. But then there are ways that we need to adapt and learn how to lead. So that's really where we are in the way that we're approaching it.
That's great. Thank you, Honor. I really appreciate that. And so I have a couple more, I guess, final questions before we turn it over to the question and answer period. And of course, saving my juicy favorite bits for last, I wanted to get, even a little bit more personal and kind of bring our conversation, full circle, just coming back to one of the stories that Danielle was talking about, for example. And there's a famous proverb that I really like that goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And Danielle, you had mentioned that you're relatively new in your role at California Wines. And, earlier today and during our prep call, you told us a powerful story of how you finally landed at your dream job. If you can please share with us some highlights of, how did you attain this role and, what you learned about the importance of your professional relationships in terms of, getting there. And if you could meet the you of, 10 years ago when you were at some of those large organizations, what would you tell her?
Wow, that's a tough one. So I think if I think back to the earlier conversations we've had, it's really been about wine being about connecting and about people and about relationships. And that's an integral part of this. You share a glass of wine with someone, you enjoy it with a meal. So it's really about that interconnectedness that we all have. And when this role came up, it was the summer of 2019. And, I really thought about it hard before I, kind of knocked on Rick's door. He was the former incumbent, and just said, hey, I'm thinking of throwing my hat in the ring for this. What do you think? Because I looked at my career and I said, everything I've done really has led to kind of this job. I've experienced managing California roles nationally, from high end to low end for entry level. I knew the Canadian wine market intimately. I knew all the LDBs. I'd worked and participated on several winery marketing associations throughout Canada, and I'd organized large scale events for clients. It was just kind of all adding up. And it was a perfect fit. And then I had to really think about, while I was at Constellation in the last kind of 5 years of my career there, I had let my network completely fall apart. And that's because I was just too busy doing the work, right? Just so immersed in what I was doing and the work I was doing that nothing else mattered. And I just neglected everything else around me. And I knew once I left there that I had to fix that quickly. So I worked really hard at kind of rebuilding that network by going out to events, by putting my face out there in a way that I'd never done before. I put a lot of time and energy and effort into that rebuild. And then I knew I could tap into that once I needed to. I really felt that I could tap into that network of people to help me do something I now need to do. And I think what was really powerful and amazing was, I think if you work hard and you you respect people and they respect you for your work and who you are and what you do, and you treat people well, that will help you in your career and in your future. And I think that's an important piece never to forget. And, I had a coach and mentor. One of my closest allies was the amazing Lisa Fenn. Shout out to Lisa. She reviewed decks, she provided counsel, she looked along the way. And I was able to tap into about 50 people I knew who were connected some way to the California Wine Institute or Honor. Shiloh was one of them, she knows very well, interviewed them and did everything I could to find a way to make sure this job happened. I was so determined. So I think tenacity and persistence and finding a way is another really big attribute I'd put to, if you want something bad enough, you'll find a way to do it. And, I'll shout out to someone else I used to work with at Vincor, Elsa McDonald. So I remember Elsa was with KPMG and she was at a trade show, and I was talking to consumers, like Shiloh was mentioning, how important that is. And she was all over me about how do I get in this business? How do I get in? And she didn't stop. She was so persistent in a good way. So yeah, there's a way you could be annoying. And she landed at Vincor, and look at her now as an MW and everything she's accomplished in her life by having that tenacity and the willingness to try to find a way to make it happen. So there's just, I think if I was to talk to my younger self, I'd say, don't neglect that network and get out sooner because you're really unhappy and you could be happier somewhere else. So take that leap, and it's a hard leap to make, but my God, I think life begins at the end of your comfort zone. It would be the advice I'd give myself.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's super powerful and like such words of wisdom, Danielle. Thank you so much. And, I certainly can relate to that. I think, now almost, 20 years into the business for me too, my temperature gauge for when I know that something isn't right for me right now is when I develop tunnel vision and my relationships drop off. That's when I know something is wrong. Because at the end of the day, if I don't stay connected to, my network, my supporters, then, I'm not really fulfilling the purpose of why I came into this business in the first place, right? So, and speaking of, connecting with others and learning and developing, Shyla, you had a really interesting point of view in our prep call last week about mentorship, becoming maybe a little bit too formalized in recent years, and certainly, the one thing that is unchanging about people and relationships is that they always change. So, can you please share your opinion with the greater audience of that, on that, please? What are some of the ways that you've, pulled people into your network, or, vice versa?
Yeah, I think the core of that comment and discussion was, I've watched the last probably 10 years really that this mentorship has been formalized and very, very set up. It's almost like dating, right? You're like, can you be my mentor? Can we set up meetings once a quarter? And I think that's wonderful. And I think that should continue. But I also think there's a lot of power, and Danielle said the word, in allies. And allies, it's much less formal. But what it comes down to, what Danielle also said to me, is respect and trust. And so you are finding people that you can develop a deeper relationship, show them who you are in the industry, show them through your work, build trust with them, build a respectful relationship. And sometimes if you're lucky, those relationships turn into friendships, which is also the beauty of the wine business. But outside of that, just developing a network of allies, of people that see you for who you are and what you contribute. They know what you're doing. Even when you're buried and you're deep and you're stressed, they see it. And I think that's really important. And I think for women, to make sure you have male allies too, and that it goes both ways. It doesn't need to be exclusive, that you need people that are on your side. And what I found with allies is the good ones. And I learned this quote from an old boss of mine, Mr. Eric Moreham, who did run Canada for Vincor. He said, you want to peek under the tent. And so it's those people that lift you up and say, I'm going to bring you into this meeting. Maybe it's it's 5 levels above where you are at this point 15 years ago. And I want you to listen. And I want you to ask me questions afterward. But I want you to come in. And so those people that will bring you in and show you how things work at a higher level, so you know what you're working toward, I think are really important. And I consider those folks allies. Another thing in the wine business is that we are usually only separated by 2 degrees of separation. So there's the whole 7 degrees of separation idea, anywhere on the planet, you're connected by 7 degrees of separation. In the wine business, it's 2. Which means no matter where you are on the planet, if you're in the wine business, 1 person removed, you will be connected back to each other. And so 1, don't burn any bridges, because it always comes back around. But also, that is an amazing thing that I can go to Italy and go to a restaurant and talk to a somm, and we know the same people in a conversation we've learned after 3 minutes. And so that 2 degrees of separation will get you far in this business. And lastly, it's not lastly, actually, another one too, but there's LinkedIn, which is your network, right? Which is now the social network. In the wine industry, we have the luxury that we actually really get to socially connect through business. And so, yes, you need your LinkedIn profile and your connections there, but really what you need to do is take time. If you see people at a tasting, pull them aside, walk around, taste some wine, have a conversation, go out to a glass of wine after, go out to a meal. That's really building your network. And we have that ability. And that is how you will get far. People need to know your face, your presence, what you're all about. And so I would just say, take some of these modern ideas of these networks and go backwards. Go back to how we used to do it, which is a table. And because that is really our business. And then lastly, I think one thing that I have learned, and it's why I'm such a strong leader and why I've gotten to the position I'm in, is to always hire people better than you. Always be confident enough to hire people that know things you don't know, that are experts in their field, that are pushing the boundaries, and bring them up, because that only brings you up. And that shows over time. And I think there's a lot of concern, with people that don't have the confidence of well, then this person's better than me and they will take my job. And you cannot ever approach it with that attitude, because if you're a good leader, you will all rise by bringing in people that are better than you for jobs. So I think that's also an important part of the relationship side.
Wow, thank you, Shyla. Those were some, for lack of a better term, some major truth bombs that you just dealt, because it definitely resonates with me. I can definitely agree that, my most successful, trade tastings when I'm out in the field is when I don't taste a single thing, but I spent the whole time just, maybe I'm standing there swirling my glass, but I'm connecting, with, people at this table and that table, and, meeting different producers and buyers, that kind of thing. And then, the second piece, really resonates with me too, that I'm definitely at a tipping point, and even developing my own company, that I've realized I am not smart or capable enough to do all of the work, and I need to find, like a dynamic whippersnapper to, kind of pick the ball up, for me, and, kind of help me move the business forward. So definitely a lot of, pearls of wisdom there. So thank you. And finally, just to kind of wrap up before we move on to our question and answer segment, Honor, you had mentioned something great last week as well about your role as an industry connector. So wondering if you could please wrap us up by, adding to some of Shyla's thoughts, please.
Yeah, happily. As a leader of a trade association, first at Sonoma County Vintners, and I was there for almost 10 years, and now here as a part of Wine Institute and running the export program, I'm fortunate enough to get to know vintners and winemakers and industry leaders from a whole range of, different channels within this industry, right? A whole range of wineries, large and small, up and down the state of California, and then even around the world. And so one of the key things that I see that I'm able to bring into the industry is to add an event, for example, as Shyla is describing, to take two people that I have had the opportunity to get to know and introduce them to each other. Do you know so-and-so? You've got this in common. I think you'd really enjoy this conversation. And that's something that I love to do. I like to find two people that I enjoy, or I've learned from, or have had a great conversation with, and connect them with each other. And then that just continues to grow. So I think that that's a really important part of the industry, and something that I feel that I'm fortunate enough to be uniquely positioned to be able to do. And then the other thing that I would add on to this is I've been so fortunate to have some tremendous mentors, either bosses of mine, men and women, that I've worked with, that have fortunately invested in me and given me opportunities. And I've learned so much from that I'm always on the lookout for taking that forward and looking for opportunities to work with someone who is coming into the industry, and being mindful of that and helping to sort of lift them up and make sure that we're always investing in that next generation, because it just continues to help us go forward. My mom was raised me as a single mom in the 70s when there were not a lot of support networks out there. She was bumping up against glass ceilings when they were a lot lower. And but every challenge that she met, every opportunity that she strove to sort of develop for herself, she did for me. And she made certain that I understood that, and that I understand that I need to continue to do the same thing for young women and young men coming up through the industry, to help clear new pathways for us to be able to expand our career opportunities and step into those things that we don't even know yet that we want to do. So I think that's a really important way of looking at, as we're developing our own careers, finding new ways to help those other people coming up as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Honor. Really appreciate that. And wow, so much amazing insights and, inspiring personal stories to process from the past hour. I certainly have a lot of personal reflection to do coming out of this event today. So let's hear a little bit from the audience about your questions and feedback. And thank you so much to everyone who's attended and who has made some time to enter some thoughts into the chat box and to send us some questions. The first question that I have is, we'll keep it, I guess, open mic for whoever would like to answer first, and then we'll kind of keep bouncing around from there. The first question is that, given that a lot of consumers don't always perceive wine as an agricultural product, not in the same way that, say, vegetables or cheese, for example, vineyards that tend to be marketed as, a lovely nature destination, for example. What kind of marketing strategies do you think could be developed to better educate audiences about, the kind of rigor that goes into making a wine, or, as Shyla said, to yell more about the farming elements of wine?
I think this is a great question, and I agree completely. And as a fourth generation, but even more importantly, a member of a sixth generation farming family, I firmly believe in supporting agriculture. It's one of the reasons why I do what I do, is to continue to support, in particular, family farming operations and looking ahead to the next generation of ag, not only here in California, but truly globally. I think it's so important. And so many of our customers just, they're thinking about, I want to have a delicious glass of crisp Sauvignon Blanc. They're not always thinking about or aware of all of the steps that go into that. And so I think that's a part of really helping to connect the dots around sustainability as one key, but always tying it back to agriculture, and that's so fundamental. Mother Nature is one of the most important, pieces of the winemaking team, and that isn't always evident. So how we do that in terms of the images that we show, how we talk about wine, always bringing it back to that, talking about, we're fortunate here in California that we're able to bring remarkable quality winemaking to our wines up and down the price band. And it's one of the benefits that we have. So making certain that we connect it back to the soil, back to the people, and then always connecting it to wine at the table, and really keeping sort of those elements front and center it's really key. So Shyla, I'm really interested. I know farming and the farming operation is so important within Jackson Family Wines that I'm really interested in your thoughts in terms of a more granular level with specific brands and wines, how you carry some of these things forward.
Yeah, thanks for the lead in. So we globally have 15,000 acres of planted vineyards. We own tens of thousands of acres that we do not farm, very specifically to allow for wildlife corridors and carbon sequestration. But 15,000 acres is a lot of acres in California, in Oregon, in South Africa, in Australia, in France, and in Italy. And farming rules in our company. The production group is the most important group, and they drive everything. And they are very, very experienced at what they do. They're constantly talking about how to be better, how to conserve more water, how we evolve with the changing climate, how we adapt varieties. All of that is a big part of what we talk about every day. To the question, how do we translate that is a challenge. I mean, it's still a challenge. And I think, one thing that I've seen is one of the most important and most effective are maps. Maps of places, macro to micro. Talk to people about the region, the weather, the way the sun affects there, the way the fog moves in and out, and then get them down into even the block level, and helping people understand how much all of that influences what they get in the glass. And so I think that's where, when we all get back to normal, the power of sitting and tasting and talking people through and helping them understand what they taste and how the terroir influences what is then in their glass. And I think that's the best way to try to help people get the agricultural side of it. Visuals are really important. These two women have two rolling vineyards behind them in their picture there, and those always help. And those are classic images that we've always used. And so I think now what we have is the power of video and the power to get video out to more people. And all of our brands, I mean, I have a full in-house video team that all day, every day, we produce about 130 videos a year telling our story and really trying to tell the story of what goes on in the vineyard all the way through to the glass so people can come along in that. And I also think right now we have to get a little aggressive, because spirits and beer and seltzer, I mean, people aren't just wine consumers. They consume all these other things too. And these guys are somehow owning the dialogue on clean and sustainable and natural. And that's our story, right? That's who we are. And so I think we've got to get out there a little bit louder and make sure that people know that wine is this, deep, soulful, traditional, millennia tradition of the land. And I do think that this is a moment, because I see these claims being made, pure, clean, all of these things around other products. And most of our products are that way, and being honest about what is used in winemaking, so people understand how we have to add yeast sometimes and what we have to do with filtration. And usually that's vegan, and making sure people know that the wines are vegan. Just because it doesn't say vegan doesn't mean that it's not. And so I think there's a lot to that, that we still have to get better at. And we are a bit, but that was a long way to answer that question.
Yeah, I think pulling the curtain back on some of the, winemaking and showing it. Before I was with Wine Institute, I was working for a wine startup in Sebastopol, and we didn't have a tasting room. We did all of our tastings literally in the winery, and we found it was so impactful. And even though it wasn't beautiful, and it wasn't necessarily glamorous where we were, there was so much interest. And if we had actual winemaking going on that day, people were fascinated to watch the sorting table. They wanted to see the bottling line. They really wanted to get all of that. And that helps connect the dots. So then how do we do that? We're very successful at doing that on a micro level, right? 3 people at a time. How do we do that on a macro level and really make ag relevant to people when they're, walking down the grocery store aisle or sitting at the restaurant table or at home? We want to make it relevant and bring it all home to them and connect it with the wines in their glass.
Danielle, thank you, Honor and Shyla. Danielle, did you have some thoughts? And then we'll move on to the next question after your comments.
I wanted to build on what Honor was saying. And I think it really fits nicely with something coming up around inside every bottle. Like what's the untold story about what's inside every bottle? And there's some nice messaging there that I think will help deliver some of this ag messaging. And I really love the deep and soulful comments, Shyla, that you mentioned of, this link to the land, because it's emotional, right? It's getting to that the net we have to crack next.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. The next question that I have from the audience is, again, open for any of the 3 of you, is what was your toughest lesson learned and how did that shape you in your career? It's a juicy nugget.
Okay, I'm willing. So I thought of Crystal Lee because she's on this call, and I had the benefit of working with Crystal Lee, she's an amazing woman in the Okanagan. And I was one of her first bosses. And she was in the Okanagan and I was in Toronto, in Mississauga, lovely Mississauga suburbs. And I was awful. I will say that Crystal Lee, without a doubt, will candidly say I was the worst boss ever in that first go around. But I had the benefit of going through some coaching and, learning and realizing I had to develop and improve myself. And it's always about what can you do from your own personal improvement to be a better leader, as Shyla mentioned. And round 2, I think we would argue was successful. Crystal Lee, I know she's out there. So I had honed and worked on, what's it going to take to help me be a better person. And yes, now I would count Crystal Lee amongst my close personal friends. So I think that would be my good learning, is that always look to improve yourself, and always think about what is it you can do better and be a better person.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And I see everyone has unmuted. Please take it away.
Yeah, I think for me, as you guys can hear, I'm very type A, go-getter, dive all in. And what I learned was the lesson on self-care, and that, you know, I was maybe going too hard, too fast for too long. And I experienced burnout technically, but I didn't know what burnout was at the time. And I think being aware of that, because that was a tough lesson, because when you get to a severe burnout point in some moments, the only way to move through it is to take a break and find a new job. You come so far. And so I think that self-care part of it, having colleagues that you have an honest enough relationship that they can look at you and say, hey, you look tired. Hey, you're not yourself. Do you need to go out to lunch? You know, or do you need a break? Maybe you need a vacation. And so I think that was my toughest lesson is making sure that as you're building your career, you're still taking care of yourself in there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Honor.
Yeah, I would have to say when I left Sonoma County Vintners after almost 10 years, and I loved that role. It was fantastic. And having the opportunity to work with and for my friends and neighbors and supporting winemaking in Sonoma County where I lived was truly a gift. And making the decision to step out of that role when things were going so well. The organization was the largest it had been. We'd been growing membership. We were raising tremendous amounts of money to then support local charitable organizations. We were traveling internationally. We'd put all of these things in place. And I'd sort of, when I started, the board had asked me to do 3 key things, which was to build a global marketing footprint for Sonoma County wines, to establish a connection with the consumer, and then to pass conjunctive labeling. So 3 really important elements. We had done all 3. And when I really looked at sort of where we were and what we were doing, I recognized that I could stay there and would have been happy and taken on new challenges, but that what I really need to do was to take myself out of that place and find what my next challenge was going to be. It was incredibly difficult because my identity was so wrapped up with that role. But I recognized that it was time. It was time for me to step out and find something new. And then it took a while. And during that time, I launched my own consulting business like Danielle did. I was so fortunate because I had the opportunity of working with the BC Wine Institute and worked on a project in the Okanagan, met incredible people there, including Krista Lee, who's like the thread connecting us. But it was what was so great about that experience. And it was very hard going from leading a large organization and working with large budgets to leading an organization of 1 with no budget. But I developed a whole new level of confidence because I recognized that I was able to face challenges that I hadn't faced before, but draw from all of my experience, and I could still find my way through. And I felt that I did some of my best work with that project and with that organization, and it was so rewarding. And I think that really helped set me up to now step into this role. And again, part of me, I don't quite know what I did right to land in this role, but I'm so glad that I did. And I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity. So I think it's, the message, sort of the moral behind that story is look deep into your heart, be honest with yourself, and don't be afraid to kick yourself out of the nest.
Yeah, absolutely. As I couldn't agree more, as Danielle, I think it was you who mentioned, life sort of starts just, at the edge of your comfort zone, right? And, to both, Danielle's points and Shyla's points, I think one for me, one of the toughest lessons I've ever learned is I think that, you'll never learn more about yourself than when you need to actually manage other people, when you have to manage their expectations and, and how they work, different people's behaviors. For me, I learned a lot about myself then. And I think that piece about self-care is so important too. This is a really rough analogy, but the bigger the stick of dynamite, the bigger the explosion. And I think for me, I've always needed now, as I kind of move forward in my career, the more that I do, the more energy that I put out, the more I need to recharge my battery and, reset at the end of the day. So thank you to all of you. I have one last, perhaps lightning round question before we wrap up for the day. So the third and last question of our afternoon is maybe just in one sentence. The majority of consumers have little awareness of what sustainability means in wine. What can you do as marketers to help consumers grasp this concept? So your thoughts in, 10 seconds, please. I know it's a tough one.
I'd say that, go ahead, Danielle.
I think we've all touched on it, and it's really about, we need to get louder with the messaging so that it's actually going to resonate and have that emotional connection to what it means. And it has to matter about what's in that glass ultimately. And that's the network cracking. So I don't think we have an answer for it yet, but I do know that we're working towards a large project, which is going to see, what is that messaging that is going to create that emotional connection and link back to what's in that glass and why they should buy that bottle of wine over another one.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we need to make it relevant. We need to make sustainability relevant to consumers and meet them at a level that makes it easy to understand and, as Danielle said, resonate with them.
Yeah, and I think just a quick one for me. So it's sustainability as it relates to the climate and the environment. It's sustainability from a social standpoint and how you work with people, take care of people, provide a livable wage, and you take care of your communities that you're making money off of and are within. And then there's a sustainable business model. You have to be able to have a business that can last into the years too. And so I think all of those are part of the sustainability side. It's not only the green part of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. We often just think of planet and we forget those other two, the people and prosperity and that holistic. But it's how do you communicate that? That's the challenge.
It's a complex idea.
Yeah.
And if it were easy,
tomorrow, ladies, will take it on.
Exactly. As I always say to my team, if it were easy, we'd already be doing it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Indeed, I guess, yes, it's up to, us to put our thinking caps on and then pass the baton to, I guess, the people that will, follow us in our paths. And so on that note, I believe that our time is up for this afternoon. I just want to thank Honor and Shyla and Danielle so much for being on today's panel. Again, just to wrap up, wanted to share some resources with everyone in the audience today about, some funds that are available to potentially further your careers as well. So from the FemDeVan side, there is a California Wines Scholarship that is worth $2,000 for BIPOC applicants. And to find out more information, please check out femdevan.com. Secondly, Capstone California. Capstone California is a new program that has made available 2 spots for a complete California wine certification program with a value of $10,000. And for more information, you can find out by visiting capstonecalifornia.com. Again, my sincere thanks so much to Honor Comfort and Danielle Giroux from California Wines. To find out more about California Wines, please visit discovercaliforniawines.ca. And also, please continue to support California Wines at your local liquor store, wherever you are. Secondly, thank you so much to Shyla Salmon from Jackson Family Wines, and you can find out more about Jackson Family Wines at jacksonfamilywines.com. I wish everyone a happy rest of your week. Please stay safe. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to FemDeVan for having me. Please feel free to share your stories and feedback on social media with us by tagging FemDeVan, Discover California Wines, myself, Debbie Shing, or Cuvée Official, and look forward to seeing you out there in the real world sometime again soon.